Right, hey guys, how are we doing? Back with another video from Ham on Beat, and today we are checking out, is there a Requiem arrow? And we're just gonna get right into it and find out.
She's up there! Ham on the beat!
The stand arrow is one of the main plot-driving objects in JoJo. It is most commonly known for being able to awaken stands in people after making contact with them.
Big deal
However,
in
there
Part
are
4.
also further powers beyond stands that the arrow has been shown to awaken.
Yeah, the
chief
Requiem.
among these is definitely the power of Requiem.
Mental.
Requiem stands were prominently featured at the end of Part 5, and since they were only present for such a short time, many fan questions have piled up in relation to them. One of the main points of confusion that people have with Requiem is
'cause
how
nothing in
exactly
6
it
was
is
a-
attained. From what we saw in the manga, a stand becomes Requiem when it is pierced with the arrow.
Yeah, because I was confused initially. I think it's going to go over this, because Kira in Part 4 gets stabbed with the arrow, and that gives him further abilities. It doesn't give him a Requiem stand, it affects him. Or so I understand. Oh, we'll find out.
However, there have been other instances of stands touching the arrow with no such effect. This has led to a theory among fans that only one arrow is capable of granting Requiem, that being
Interesting.
the arrow with the beetle design introduced in Part 5. In this video, I'll be going over the cases for and against there being a Requiem arrow.
Oh, cool.
As
So it's
well
not
as
like
look into the nature of Requiem
definite.
and the arrow itself. While the origin of the arrows is clouded in mystery, we do have a general idea of it. Around 50,000 years ago, a meteorite crashed into Cape York, Greenland. At an unknown point afterwards, arrows were created from the meteorite for the purpose of awakening stands. It is unknown how many arrows have existed in the past,
And how did they know that the arrows would work that way?
but only 6 arrows are known to still exist in modern history. 5 of them feature a hole through the middle, and one is slightly larger and decorated with a beetle. 5 of the 6 arrows, including the beetle arrow, were sold to Enya by Diavolo. The beetle arrow ended up in Dio's possession and was given to Pucci to awaken his stand in 1988.
Oh, right, so that's how she got down. How did I miss that? Huh.
The arrow was brought back to Egypt by Pucci and remained there until after Dio's death, when it
Like, I knew that she got sold them, but I didn't know it was by Diavolo. Like, that's pretty interesting.
was discovered by Polnareff sometime in the 1990s. Polnareff kept the arrow while in hiding in Italy, and it finally resurfaced in Rome to be used in the finale of Part 5. Afterwards, it was kept by Giorno as a way to remember his journey. So what are the ideas in favor of the Requiem arrow?
Yeah, let's go that one
First of
first.
all, it is true that the beetle arrow is the only one that has been seen to grant Requiem. Some have
So you would
argued in
assume.
the past that Bites the Dust is a Requiem stand, and that was unlocked with a normal arrow. However, I
But-
disagree with this. Bites the Dust simply has too many differences to be considered Requiem. First, Bites the Dust is more like a separate ability than an actual evolution. The appearance of Killer Queen is not changed, and it is treated as Killer Queen's tertiary bomb rather than a whole new form. Second, Kira was the one who was pierced with the arrow. For Requiem, we know that the stand is the thing that has to be pierced.
I was just gonna have a right case,
So
so
what
I was right.
exactly
Right,
is
cool.
Bites the Dust? I think that it is correct to assume that it is related to Requiem in some ways. I believe it is the same concept of power beyond the arrow that was mentioned by Polnareff, since it is also additional strength gained after already having a stand. I think it's likely that Araki considers Bites the Dust an early idea for a
Concept.
Requiem-like ability,
Right, yeah.
and later fleshed this out with the full Requiem concept in Part 5.
Yeah, it's like how the stands aren't as complex in Part 3 because he's messing around with the idea. Like, it's the first time. Yeah.
However, in the world of JoJo itself, we simply cannot consider Bites the Dust to be Requiem with everything we know about it. Next, some argue that if the beetle arrow is not the only one that can grant Requiem, then why did Diavolo need to get the arrow from Polnareff instead of using the one he already had? This is because Diavolo didn't even know about the power of Requiem until he figured it out from Polnareff's plan.
Right.
And by that time, the arrow in Pulpo's possession had been destroyed by Giorno. When first speaking to Polnareff, Bucciarati also says that the boss was thoughtless with the arrow, This piece of dialogue seems to imply that if Diavolo hadn't been thoughtless with it, then he would have been able to still use it to obtain Requiem.
Right.
The other argument in favor of the Requiem arrow is that the arrow itself looks different from the rest. However, in my opinion, the reason the beetle arrow was given a different design was to indicate its special role in the story,
Make it stand
rather
out
than any
more.
special power that it had. The characters themselves never really refer to this arrow differently from the others, other than Giorno remarking that it appears different from the one he saw before. It's definitely true that Polnareff treats this arrow as their last hope, and some use that to argue in favor of the Requiem arrow. But this is how Polnareff would treat it regardless of if it's the only arrow capable of Requiem, since it's the only arrow they have access to have a chance against King Crimson. Another argument I've seen people saying is that since the arrows are made from the Stand meteorite, and since the power of them is derived from the virus inside of it, then because the beetle arrow is larger and made from more of the meteorite, then it must have more of the virus and have a stronger effect, resulting in Requiem. We simply do not have enough information to say that's true.
How do you figure that out? Yeah.
The main argument I see people say here is that beyond just giving Requiem, the beetle arrow also gives strong stands in general, as seen with Whitesnake and Weather Report, two very powerful stands that both resulted from Pucci's contact with the beetle arrow.
Right.
Others have said that the World, and by extension Star Platinum, result from this as well. However, we do not know what arrow Dio used to gain his stand. I don't think this is a very convincing argument. First of all, there has been nothing to suggest that more or less of the virus has any effect on the strength of a stand. We've seen plenty of ridiculously powerful stands that come from the normal arrows. King Crimson itself is known as one of the most intimidating stands out there, so much that Requiem was needed to beat it. And that presumably came from the arrow that Diavolo kept, which was not the beetle arrow. No. Also, if we're following this logic, then a stand made from an even smaller arrow, like the arrow fragment in Part 6...
This is great. Go on.
...should be weaker. This definitely isn't the case, since Stone Free was strong enough to go toe-to-toe in a fight with Whitesnake, which resulted from the beetle arrow, and later Sea Moon, which should be even stronger than Whitesnake. Also, if more virus means a stronger stand, then the amount of contact with the arrow should also matter. There's characters that only received a small wound from the arrow, and others that were fully pierced. If that were the case, then we would see a strength difference there as well. The biggest point against this whole idea is that the strength of a stand is simply not something that can really be measured, a point that Part 6 itself made. Stands that would theoretically be considered the worst or weakest are still strong in their own way.
Yeah, that's what I like about stands. It's like, you can figure out ways of defeating other stand users.
Others bring up that we have seen an arrow pierce a stand without granting Requiem before, and that this indicates that only the beetle arrow can do so.
Black Sabbath.
The example pointed to here is Gold Experience, when he was pierced by the arrow of Black Sabbath near the beginning of Part 5. This is where things get complicated, since we need to talk about the idea of worthiness and how the arrow chooses its targets. As you may know from my previous videos, the system of fate in JoJo is integral to everything that occurs.
Oh yes.
This is because within JoJo, fate is a physical form of gravity that moves all objects along a fated path. Everything that has mass has gravity, and the invisible links between objects may be stronger or weaker depending on their gravity. For example, we know from the series that stand users are drawn to each other. This isn't simply a saying, but it's a real force that unconsciously draws these people together. Part 4
definitely pushes that.
Similarly, we have seen that the arrow is physically drawn to potential stand users, as if it has a mind of its own. It's likely that even the stand meteor itself was drawn to Earth due to the latent potential present in its inhabitants.
Interesting.
In Part 6, there is an important piece of dialogue from Foo Fighters that discusses the idea of matter itself having intelligence. The arrow is intelligent in this way, and not only is it drawn to those with stand potential, but it also seeks out those with further potential beyond stands. This was seen with Kira in Part 4, when the arrow moved on its own to pierce him and awaken Bites the Dust. So I believe the same is true for Requiem. The arrow will only awaken a further ability if the arrow deems them compatible.
Right.
As Polnareff said in Part 5, the arrow chooses its targets. If we look at it with this idea, then Giorno was not worthy at the beginning of the part since the arrow had no effect, but was at the end of the part and was able to obtain Requiem. In the example of Polnareff, his soul was worthy, but his body was just physically beyond the point of being able to control the stand. So while the transformation still took place, he eventually lost control. Some have used this to argue that Diavolo was not worthy of Requiem. People point to the scene of the arrow passing through King Crimson's hands in the final battle, and say that this is the arrow rejecting him. I'd just like to make it clear that this is not what happened here.
Okay.
After Bucciarati destroyed Chariot Requiem's light, its ability was undone and all of the stands went back to their proper bodies. When this happened, King Crimson became intangible again to go back to Diavolo. This is why the arrow passed through. Theoretically, if this had not happened, King Crimson definitely would have become Requiem. So the arrow simply got away from King Crimson before the transformation fully took place, similar to what happened with Silver Chariot. The largest argument surrounding the Requiem arrow is definitely hinging on what happens when people make contact with it, as I mentioned with Giorno in the Black Sabbath fight. In the past, I've argued that Giorno could have been worthy there, but that the arrow was also removed before he could transform. Although now I think that the most likely scenario is that Giorno was not worthy at that time, and wouldn't be worthy until he underwent his transformation through Resolve into a figure that could rival the boss. However, there's some more to get into regarding the arrow's role in Fate. This is probably the point that will complicate the matter the most. Since we know in JoJo that Fate controls all actions, then we could still look at the Beetle arrow as a kind of Requiem arrow, even though it itself may not possess any extra powers. Just like how the Joestar bloodline has a strong bond through their connections in Fate, the Beetle arrow is given its strength through its role that was preordained by Fate. So while the arrow itself may not be special, the role that was given to it by Fate is. Since in response to Diavolo's tampering with Fate, the gravity of the world worked to give the arrow's power to Giorno, resulting in Diavolo's defeat. So in that way, I would agree with the Beetle arrow having a special status. So in the end, no, I do not believe that the Beetle arrow is a Requiem arrow.
Fair.
There is simply not material in the story to support that idea, and a lot of the points made in its favor are contradicted in one way or another. I do think that the Beetle arrow has thematic significance and is special because of the events surrounding it.
Yeah,
but I don't think it really has
out.
any different powers compared to the rest. If you want to see more video topics like this, comment them down below.
Interesting. So, yeah, there isn't enough facts. There isn't enough information. We don't have the data to prove whether there was a actual Requiem arrow or not. So, interesting. I like how we did both sides before coming up with the end answer. Cool. Anyway, thank you to my patrons. If you want to have your name at the end of every video I upload, links to the Patreon page. $1 a month is the last spot challenge. Greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much for that. And thank you all for watching. What do you guys think of that? What do you guys think of this? Click like, subscribe if you want anything. Leave comments down below. Let me know that I should watch discuss in future videos. And I'll see you guys next time.